lacing up your boots, if you're lucky enough to have them, or just strapping a bit of leather to your feet and calling it good. Tonight's story is one of endless mud, dubious companions, and a whole lot of questionable smells. And yes, you're about to find out why even the simplest trip back then was practically a survival test. You probably won't survive this, but at least you'll get a good night's sleep trying. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love knowing which corner of the globe you're in when you're drifting off with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in the dim glow of dawn, a gray haze settling over the medieval village. The cockerel has already done its job, the distant clamor of hooves and rattling carts hinting that the road is alive. You, however, are about to join it, and you quickly realize there is no romantic farewell. No packed lunch and wax paper. This is the Middle Ages, and traveling is less about adventure and more about bracing yourself for chaos. The very idea of leaving home is a small miracle. Most people in this world never venture more than 10 miles from the spot where they were born. Roads are dangerous, the outside world is suspicious, and your body is already exhausted from simply surviving. But here you are, foolishly or bravely, deciding to head out. Scholars still argue whether medieval people traveled more than we assume, or if the majority really stayed rooted to their villages. Either way, you're about to test the theory firsthand. First things first, you check your footwear. Leather shoes if you're lucky, straw-stuffed clogs if you're not, and barefoot if you've truly drawn the short straw. You tug at your rough woolen tunic, scratchy and warm, but already smelling faintly of smoke from last night's hearth. Then there's the belt, always the belt. Everything hangs from it. Your tiny pouch of coins, your eating knife, maybe even a flask if you're blessed by fortune. You step outside, and the chill morning air smacks you with reality. Forget the idea of smooth highways or orderly cobblestones. The great Roman roads may still cut across parts of Europe, but time and neglect have left most of them crumbling, overgrown or used as dumping grounds. More often than not, you'll be slogging through mud paths that double as open-air drains. There's no neat separation between where people walk, where pigs wallow, and where the muck flows. It's all the same earthy soup. You trudge forward, and before long the nagging thought creeps in. Did you actually pack enough? Or too much? Traveling in the Middle Ages isn't about convenience. It's about lugging whatever might keep you alive for one more muddy mile. And you don't have a sleek suitcase with wheels. You've got a rough sack, maybe a basket, or if you're truly desperate, a bundle tied up in cloth and slung over your back, like a scene out of a bad morality play. What goes inside? Let's just say medieval travelers weren't picky. Bread is the #1 candidate, stale, rock hard, often baked days ago, but it lasts. If you're rich, you might bring cheese, maybe dried meat, but for most people it's just endless hunks of brown bread. You tuck it into your pouch and try not to think about how unappetizing it'll taste after the first few hours. And water? Well, good luck with that. Most people don't trust it unless it's straight from a clean spring. More often, you carry a little jug of thin ale, weak enough that even kids drink it. Better a mild buzz than dysentery, right? You also make sure you've got your knife. Not just for protection, though that's certainly on your mind, but for eating. Forks are a future luxury, so this single blade is your multi-purpose tool. Cutting food, fixing leather, maybe stabbing the occasional overly friendly highway dog. You hang it on your belt and feel slightly reassured, though you know deep down it won't help much if a real bandit decides to pay you a visit. One quirky thing many travelers carried was charms or relics. Maybe a saint's medallion, maybe a rabbit's foot, maybe a tiny bag of herbs. Superstition fills every pocket, because when you're out on the road with little hope of help, you cling to anything that promises protection. You pat your little charm pouch like it's going to hold back a storm. Spoiler, it won't. Your outfit, meanwhile, isn't winning any fashion awards. Woolen tunic, itchy undergarments, maybe a cloak if you're lucky. If you're rich, you have boots. If you're poor, you've just stuffed rags into worn-out shoes. Either way, your feet are already complaining. And that cloak? Heavy, damp, smells faintly of sheep. You'll curse it when the sun's out, then bless it when the rain starts. Scholars still argue whether medieval travelers were really as poorly equipped as the chronicles suggest, or if wealthy merchants carried far more comforts than we think. But in your case, you're not wealthy, and comfort is already a forgotten dream. Your fellow travelers have their own peculiar luggage. A merchant you pass by has a donkey stacked high with bolts of wool, squeaking under the weight. A pilgrim clutches a wooden staff tipped with a scallop shell, proof of his supposed holy mission. A woman balances a wicker basket on her head, filled with dried fish that stinks enough to clear a 20-foot radius. The pack digs into your shoulders as the road ahead forks. One path looks wide and well-trodden, though its surface is a mess of ruts, puddles, and half-collapsed stones. The other looks like a narrow trail winding off between hedgerows and trees, tempting you with the idea of a shortcut. You already know the truth. There are no shortcuts in the Middle Ages, only different flavors of misery. If you're lucky, you find yourself on one of the old Roman roads, broad, straight, and layered with stones that have somehow survived the centuries. They were built with such stubborn engineering that pieces of them are still around today. Scholars still argue whether medieval travelers truly appreciated these remnants or simply cursed them for being broken. Mossy hazards. To you, in this moment, they're both. The stones jut at odd angles, ready to twist an ankle, but at least they keep you out of the worst mud. More often, though, you find yourself trudging along dirt tracks. They aren't just muddy, they're multi-purpose community spaces. Pigs root around in the muck, chickens flap across your path, children play in rags, and someone has definitely dumped last night's chamber pot right where you step. Your feet squelch, and you quickly stop bothering to avoid the worst patches. Resistance is futile. The narrow side paths, those so-called shortcuts, are worse. They snake through forests or across fields. And though they might shave off a mile, they're risky. Dense undergrowth hides roots that trip you. And worse, thieves know exactly where to wait. Step off the main road and you may as well paint a target on your back. Still, sometimes you take them, muttering a little prayer to your charm pouch. Oddly enough, the main roads are rarely straight lines between towns. They twist to avoid rivers, wiggle around private estates, and detour to pass a monastery or market. You realize that traveling in this world isn't about the fastest route, it's about the safest, the least muddy, or the one that might actually get you somewhere before you collapse. You pass by a crossroads marked with a weather-worn wooden sign. The letters are crude, half illegible, and point in directions that seem more symbolic than useful. You squint, tilt your head, and pretend it helps. But really, you're following the flow of travelers, rather than trusting a plank of wood, hammered into the ground decades ago. One quirky detail catches your eye. Shrines dot the roadside. Small wooden crosses or stone niches with candles flickering inside. Some are dedicated to saints, others to local legends, and they serve as both spiritual waypoints and superstitious rest stops. You notice people touching them, leaving flowers, or muttering prayers before moving on. You copy them, not because you're convinced, but because you'd rather not tempt fate. You've been walking long enough to notice something strange. The road is never empty. No matter how remote the path feels, someone always appears sooner or later, and each one tells you something about who braves the medieval road. The company is as varied as it is questionable, and you quickly learn that who you travel alongside can decide whether the day feels tolerable or utterly unbearable. First, there are the pilgrims. You spot them by their staffs, wide-brimmed hats, and badges pinned to cloaks, symbols collected from holy shrines. They walk with grim determination, eyes fixed on some distant salvation. A few sing hymns under their breath, tuneless and endless, while others limp along silently, nursing blisters the size of coins. You wonder if their piety is stronger than their sore feet. Quirky detail, some even carry scallop shells, the medieval version of a travel badge, rattling against their cloaks as they walk. Scholars still argue whether every pilgrim was genuinely devout or if some simply used pilgrimages as excuses to wander, escape debts, or just have a very extended holiday. Then there are the merchants. They travel in groups for safety, leading mules or donkeys piled high with goods. Their chatter is constant, haggling, complaining, calculating profits even before reaching market. You overhear one discussing wool prices, while another grumbles about tolls on the next bridge. They glance at you suspiciously, measuring whether you might be thief or customer. To them, everyone is a potential transaction. Minstrels and entertainers appear too, dragging battered instruments or leading a performing monkey on a rope. Their job is to fill taverns with bawdy songs or spin stories in village squares. But on the road they look tired, hungry and slightly desperate. One lute player strums idly as he walks, strings badly out of tune. But you can't deny the faint rhythm makes the mud a little easier to tolerate. Wanderers, beggars, and vagabonds shuffle by in ragged clothes, They carry nothing but patched sacks and hollow eyes. Some mutter pleas for food, others simply stare, and you feel your pouch instinctively as they pass. The line between fellow traveler and potential thief blurs uncomfortably often. You realize the road is as much a stage for survival as it is for travel. You fall into step beside a farmer pushing a small cart. He nods, says nothing, and continues trudging in silence. The cart squeaks, the donkey sighs, and you share a mile of wordless companionship before drifting apart. This is the rhythm of medieval travel. Temporary alliances, fleeting conversations, strangers you'll never see again. The road might be filled with pilgrims and merchants, but what truly lurks in your mind isn't companionship, it's danger. You can feel it every time the hedgerows close in, every time the forest shadows stretch across the path. Somewhere out there, bandits wait. The Middle Ages may be famous for castles and knights, but for the ordinary traveler, it's the lurking menace of thieves that defines the journey. You hear whispers before you see them, rumors traded between fellow travelers. Don't go alone near the river bend. Avoid the woods past the mill. There's a gang near the crossroads armed with cudgels. Each warning plants itself in your head, and as you walk, every rustle in the bushes becomes a potential ambush. Bandits don't look like monsters. They look like you, ragged, hungry, desperate. Some are outlaws, ex-soldiers turned to crime. Their discipline long gone, but their swords still sharp. Others are villagers who've given up on farming and chosen robbery instead. One quirky detail? Some even dress as false pilgrims, blending in until the moment they draw knives from under their cloaks. You never quite know who to trust. Scholars still argue whether medieval roads were truly overrun with bandits or whether chroniclers exaggerated for drama. To you, right now, it doesn't matter. The fear is real. You tighten your grip on your knife, though you know it's laughably small compared to the weapons that might be waiting. A cudgel can smash bone, a crossbow can drop you before you even blink. You're not a fighter. You're just a stubborn traveler with sore feet. Still, you rehearse in your head how you might swing the knife if cornered, how you'd shout, how you'd run. The truth is, most people don't travel alone for this very reason. Safety lies in numbers. A lone figure is prey. A group is at least a challenge. That's why you keep close to a cluster of merchants, hoping their presence will deter anyone watching from the shadows. Of course, you realize with a grim smile, they're probably thinking the exact same thing about you. The landscape doesn't help your nerves. Trees loom on either side, their branches arching overhead like skeletal hands. The path narrows, and suddenly you're walking through a natural tunnel of green. Your heart ticks faster. Every crack of a twig makes your head snap around. Was that a deer? Or something else? You remember hearing that some bandits dig pits along the roadside, covering them with branches to trap carts and animals. Others roll logs across the path to block wagons, then swoop in when travelers stumble. You picture it vividly, half expecting to trip into a hole or face a barricade at the next bend. And then, laughter. Not close but faint, echoing from somewhere ahead. Rough voices, joking too loudly. You slow your pace, listening. The merchants around you tense, their donkeys shifting uneasily. Your nerves are already raw from the thought of bandits, and now the road throws another trial at you. Water. Streams, rivers, and marshy patches are as common as mud, and they are never convenient. If you think bridges will save you, well, you're about to be disappointed. The first river you reach looks shallow, its surface rippling under the afternoon sun. It seems harmless. You picture yourself wading across, boots only slightly wet, cloak just brushing the surface. Then you step in and reality slaps you. The water is icy, the current stronger than expected, and within seconds you're knee-deep and wobbling. Your boots fill instantly, squishing with every step. You scramble to the other bank, soaked, shivering, and furious. Congratulations, your day is ruined, and it's only mid-afternoon. If you're lucky, you come across a ferryman. Lucky is a generous word because ferrymen know they control the only safe passage. They eye you up and down, deciding how much to charge. A single coin, sometimes two, depending on how desperate you look. You climb into a creaky wooden boat, praying it doesn't spring a leak halfway across. The ferryman rows lazily, humming to himself, while you clutch your pack and avoid looking at the dark water below. Oddly enough, ferrymen often know all the gossip of the region. They hear it from every traveler forced into their boat. Some even act like storytellers, muttering tales of saints, witches, or drowned souls. You don't know whether to be entertained or horrified. Bridges do exist, but they're not the sturdy stone arches you might imagine. Most are rickety wooden planks bound together with rope. sagging under their own weight. You step onto one and it groans like an old man's knees. Each footstep makes the boards bounce, water rushing below. You grip the rail, if there even is one, and shuffle forward, hoping this isn't the day it collapses. Scholars still argue whether local lords genuinely tried to maintain these bridges for travelers or whether they only cared if the structure served their own castle. From your perspective, staring at the gaps between boards, the answer is obvious. Nobody built this for your comfort. And then there are toll bridges. Just when you think you're safe, a guard steps out, hand extended. He demands a fee, sometimes official, sometimes entirely invented on the spot. You fumble for coins, wishing you had the courage to argue. But the guard's spear makes the choice simple. You pay, grumbling under your breath, and keep walking. Your feet ache, your cloak still clings damp against your shoulders. And now you begin to notice the real divide on the road, how you travel. On foot, you feel every stone, every muddy rut, every mile. On horseback, you trade one misery for another, speed for sore muscles and a sorter backside. Either way, travel in the Middle Ages is far from graceful. You plod forward on your own 2 feet, and every step reminds you why most journeys rarely stretch beyond a day's walk. Your boots, if you're lucky, enough to have them, are already splitting at the seams, letting in mud and water. If you're less fortunate, it's just sandals or patched shoes, stuffed with straw for warmth. Each step squelches and you swear you can hear your toes protesting. Walking is the default, the commoner's fate. It's slow, exhausting, and constant, but it costs nothing, and that makes it priceless. Along the road, you pass those lucky enough to ride. Horses are for the wealthy, knights, nobles, or well-off merchants. From your muddy perspective, they look like lords gliding above the muck. But the truth isn't so flattering. Spend hours bouncing on a saddle, and your thighs rub raw, your back knots, and your entire body vibrates with every hoofbeat. You can almost hear the groans of those riders as they dismount, walking stiff-legged like broken marionettes. Mules and donkeys, though slower, are far more common. They carry loads, sometimes people, sometimes both. You watch as a thin merchant rides one. His goods piled so high the poor beast disappears beneath the stack. The donkey brays, stubbornly refuses a puddle, then finally lurches forward with a noise that sums up everyone's mood. It's a reminder. Travel is as hard on animals as it is on you. One quirky sight catches your eye. A cart pulled not by horses but by oxen. Slow as a funeral march, they plod forward, chewing cud with complete indifference to the road. The driver shouts, prods, and curses, but the oxen ignore him. Travelers groan, stuck behind the lumbering beasts. But nobody dares overtake. The road is too narrow, too muddy. You shuffle along behind them, choking on the smell, until finally, mercifully, the cart veers off toward a village track. Scholars still argue whether medieval people truly preferred walking over riding, given the discomfort of saddles and the expense of feeding animals. But looking at your blistered feet, you'd trade discomfort for speed in a heartbeat. Of course, there are wagons, if you can pay. You spot one bouncing along the ruts, passengers clutching the sides as though it's a ship in a storm. The wooden wheels hit every rock, every hole, shaking bones and rattling teeth. Children cry, mothers scold, and a chicken flaps madly from a basket at the back.